Welcome to the EdTech Throwdown. Join us, Eric Guise and Nick Johnson, as we dive into today's best EdTech tools, tips, and practices. We do the research so you can teach your class. Remember to follow us on social media like Instagram, X, or Facebook by looking for the handle @EdTech Throwdown. Now please enjoy the show.
Welcome to the EdTech Throwdown. This is episode 165 called EdTech Resources for the Summer. In this episode, we'll talk about the resources that we'll be exploring while on this year's summer vacation. This is another episode you don't want to miss. Check it out.
All right, back with episode 165. Happy to be here. This is reoccurring each year or annual episode that we like to do just to give you something to think about over the summer as you might be taking some time to relax and refresh about education. I want to bring this up because I hope that as school lets out, that you just take like a solid week or two to not do anything related to work. Take that time to refresh, take that time to rejuvenate and, miss education for a little bit. That's a good thing. Keeps you coming back every year feeling refreshed. Just take some time off.
Yeah, EdTech teachers or teachers who like EdTech also tend to be the ones that are working really hard throughout the year. And that's not a statement in general, like all teachers work really hard in different ways, but if you're interested in this world, it is purely out of your own interest, right? So you're likely spending a lot of your own free time trying out new websites or new apps and extensions, testing them, dealing with the ins and outs of being on the front lines of, hey, what can quizzes do for me? Or what about this new, some element of magicschool.ai? And that takes a toll on you, man. Just like you said, more than anything, before you even consider the resources in this episode, give yourself some downtime, EdTech teachers, to not deal with that, to not look at a screen, to just kind of hang out. I know I'm chomping at the bit for it. Even as we record today, our school's still in session. New Jersey goes pretty late every year, compared to a lot of schools around the United States at least. So we're still looking at like 2.5-ish more weeks, but boy, am I ready. Even now, I'm staring out a window at one of the most beautiful days I've seen in a long time. The sky is super blue. The wind is blowing. I can't hear them, but I imagine the birds are chirping, and I want to be outside really bad.
That's pure poetry right there, Nick.
There you go.
All right, so let's just start thinking about some of the things that after these first 2 weeks, when we go into our break, what we can do in order to kind of refresh our craft and maybe get a little bit better. But before we go into that, let's take a listen to our friends over at the Teach Better Podcast Network.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. You can find out more at teachbetter.com/podcasts. Now let's get back to the episode.
We are back to get into our summer resources list. These are the things that Guise and I plan to take a look at as we relax by the pool or on the beach or in the mountains or whatever it is we're doing, maybe just sitting in our living rooms, scrolling the phone from time to time. Of course, this is after we take some much needed time away from all this stuff when, as you put it, you start to maybe miss education again a little bit. You got some of that energy back. What are we going to be doing? We're going to go over some books. We'll do that first. Maybe I'll just give the general outline here, and then you can start it off officially. But we're going to go over some of the books that we plan to read. I know for me, that's something I'm trying to work on better, is actually sitting down and reading books. But we've found a couple that we plan to look at. We're going to talk about some of the PD that we would like to complete and or attend. And finally, we're going to talk about some of our preferred podcasts, because while we have a podcast, we also listen to other people's podcasts too, to just sort of be part of this, never-ending idea exchange that is EdTech podcasting. All right, So that's what we're going to give you guys today in this episode. Do you want to start it off with your book selections, plural, or at least one of them?
Yeah, I'll start off. So over the summer, I try to read more than what I do during the year.
Yeah.
During the year, my routine is I get into school early, even though the last couple of weeks I haven't been able to. My allergies, seasonal allergies are killing me. It slows the whole process down in the morning. But what I do is get into work early and I'll watch either a TED Talk or listen to a podcast on the way in, or I'll read a chapter of a book once I get into work. That's usually my flow, and it usually takes me about a month to get through a book just because I take them in small chunks. Now, I don't know how you are with books, Nick, but I have to have a paperback. I have to have something that I physically have to flip. All right, that's one. And I always have to have a writing utensil. So I just ordered Matt Miller's new AI for Educators book. I'll put the link in the show notes for an Amazon link that you could purchase it. I'm not getting anything for saying this or anything along those lines, but I'm sure that most people out there that listen to us know Matt Miller because we mention him a lot. He writes books so that all educators can understand them. So he'll take a complex topic and he'll break it down into chunks so everyone can understand it. Whether it's your first time looking at AI, whether you're an experienced AI person, you're going to get something out of this book. And like I said, I haven't read it yet, but I know it from reading his past books. And I have them all. And I do something called wrecking the book. There are a couple different ways you could wreck it, and it's in total respect of the book. So I know I call it wrecking the book, but usually wrecking the book means that the author signs it. Now, I have a couple of Matt Miller books, and I think he's probably the only one that I haven't got signed it yet. I'll catch up with him at a conference and try to get him to sign one.
Wait, is wrecking the book your term, or is that a term that you've heard somewhere else?
I don't know. I can't remember. I call it wrecking the book. You know, when people get married, they call it wrecking the dress.
Yeah.
They'll go, after they use it, they'll go do something to it.
I gotcha.
But I think a radio station gave out T-shirts, and they always asked the listeners if they wanted to wreck it, meaning that everyone at the studio signs it.
Gotcha.
And everyone says yes. But that's wrecking. But I continued that by saying when I get books, I wreck it because in the margins, I take copious notes. And my notes are a mixture of a quote that I like from the book, or a topic I like from the book, or an idea that I have for, a podcast based on a topic, or an idea that just comes to my mind. Sometimes when we do this podcast, most times, I think of an idea right on the spot that's not in the show notes, and you know what? I just have verbal, I don't know, lack of a better word, verbal diarrhea, and I just spit it out.
Right.
It's a reflex. But what I'm saying is I like to take notes. I like to reflect in the margins, and I like to come back to that book later on, especially right before school, and see what I could share with our teachers. So I would highly recommend, and I can't say anything about it yet because I just ordered it, AI for Educators, Learning Strategies, Teacher Efficiencies, and the Vision for an Artificial Intelligence Future by Matt Miller.
Yeah, that sounds like a great one. I love all Matt Miller's stuff as well. And, we all need these ideas for AI. A couple of my selections are going to tie into that specifically just because we're deep in it as far as figuring out how to make education work with AI, not against it. And it's tough. So I'm sure Matt has some good ideas, just like always. My first book is called Storytelling with Purpose, Digital Projects to Ignite Student Curiosity. And I chose this, honestly, just based on the title, because it sounds exactly like what me and you try to do more than anything else, right? We are always trying to teach our students about narrative and the power of narrative when doing anything, really, whether it's teaching or creating projects or I don't know, even just writing an impactful email to somebody, right? Narrative is really important, and doing it effectively is really important. And narrative is also the best way to build projects that your students care about and engage in, and most importantly, learn from. So this is a book by Michael Hernandez that addresses this exact thing. I haven't started it yet, but some specifics that Mr. Hernandez or Dr. Hernandez, I apologize, I don't know the degree level of this person, but here's some of the things that he claims this book will do. Shows how to create uncheatable assessments through student-created story projects. That caught my eye because one of the ways that you can, I hate to use the word combat, but let's switch it to something more positive, work with an AI world in education is to design your assessments so that the students can use AI, but literally only to support what they're doing, not do the project for them. The sort of challenge of that is this is hard to do. From the teacher side, this is very hard to do because there's not a whole lot that AI can't do. So you really have to think about it. And this project is, or this book is going to address that and give us some ideas. So I'm super interested in that. You know, some other things, helping educators create meaningful learning experiences by integrating EdTech tools and storytelling in their curriculum. Again, this is, just preaching to the choir for Guise and I, but it's essentially all about storytelling and how that can be tied in with EdTech to, support learning. He's got sample lessons in here. There's case studies in there. So it's not just like these, here's a bunch of ideas that you would just have to then go figure out how to do, classroom teacher. There's actual lessons that are like ready to use for you, which always is a plus for me. And one of the reasons I chose this over some other similar books. So I'm pretty pumped about it. The title again, if that sounds good to you, is called Storytelling with Purpose, Digital Projects to Ignite Student Curiosity.
Yeah, I agree with you. Storytelling is a big part of what we do and what we ask our students to do. My next one is called Leaders Eat Last. It's by Simon Sinek, and this one's a New York Times bestseller. What caught my eye with this one is I'm big into leadership. I'm big into learning how other people get people motivated and how they show people respect. So when I look at this one, the little sub-story that I read about this is that there's a guy that is in the military, and he always noticed how some of the top-level officials in his unit always ate last when they were at the mess hall, which signified that they wanted to make sure that their guys were taken care of and that they were okay. But there's more into that, but that was the main thing that I saw. I really like that. I really like the fact that leaders often do these little things that are oftentimes overlooked. And the reasoning behind it has a significant impact when it is, looked at from other people. I always tell my athletes when I coach them that there are three things that we need to do. One, control the things that we can control. All right, that's huge. And the second thing is to respect everyone around you. And the third thing is always practice like everybody is watching. So what that means is that when the coach has their back turned towards you, you want to make sure you're practicing just as hard and not cheating yourself out of an opportunity to progress. And that kind of reminded me of this book. I picked it up. It's going to be on my stack of books to read, and that was my second one. That's Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek.
That's cool. I love these ones that aren't necessarily educational resources, but have things that apply to education. I mean, teachers, if nothing else, you guys, all of us, we are leaders of that classroom every time we step in there with a group of students, many of whom may not care about the content that you're trying to teach them. And to do that effectively, maybe first and foremost, you got to know how to be a good leader. And that's a neat take on it. The military aspect, the athletics aspect, all those things, it teaches you so much good stuff. Especially, as high school teachers, we see a lot of student leaders who are in that position just because they're like the loudest person in the room, right? And that works for a little while, but a great leader, as you point out, is often maybe the quietest person in the room who doesn't mind sort of hanging back and letting everybody else eat first, as you put it. Very cool approach, and I hope some people get something out of that if you pick it up. I'll roll now into my last one, which is another educational book, but it does have a different spin. Not necessarily EdTech. This one is called Schoolishness, which I like the word immediately. Schoolishness, alienated education in the quest for authentic, joyful learning. This is by an author called Susan Bloom. And I like this because Susan Bloom defines this word schoolishness as the type of teaching and learning that, even I still do for many of my classes. And would be like the packaged stuff, right? The direct instructed notes and note sheet that you've been using now for 5 years. It's fast and it gets the job done, but it feels packaged. It is unimaginative. It's uniform. It is arbitrary in a way. There's a predetermined time. Like this lesson takes 30 minutes, and that's what it takes, regardless of what happens. And practically, of course, some of those things have to happen in a classroom from time to time. I get that, but the less of that you can do, the better, right? And the less schoolish that you can be, and a lot of our students learn to engage with school in a very unimaginative way because those are the types of classrooms that they're in, right? They show up, they take the notes, they do some sort of low-level studying, and they show up and hope for the best on an exam. And that's fine. I'm not saying that stuff is bad. I know it has to happen from time to time, but there are other ways. There's more creative ways, there's more engaging ways, and this book seems to be all about that. What really caught my eye is that Bloom sort of breaks down options for being less schoolish into different dimensions. I think from the initial reading I did, there's 10 different dimensions that she sort of separates this out into. And I like that sort of thing. I like these classifications that people come up with because it does help you to understand, come up with some different ideas. And it seems like she's got lots of really cool ideas, like referring to human learning as a superpower, right? Which is kind of a neat take on it. And I'm just excited about something that isn't directly EdTech, but that I think will help with a lot of the problems that we're seeing in education today. And then that, of course, is going to inform a lot of the stuff that we talk about next year and bring to this show and bring to our own classrooms. So if that sounds cool, the title again, Schoolishness, Alienated Education and the Quest for Authentic, Joyful Learning.
Yeah, I like that one. I think it, anytime that we could classify things in a unique way, that definitely does pique my interest.
Yeah.
And like you said, I think this book does a solid job of doing that. I wonder if there's a lot of infographics that go with it, because I learn a little bit better with the pictures and things like that.
Could be.
But as I said earlier, I would wreck the book and make my own infographic right in the pages, on the margins, or if there's a free page there somewhere in the middle. All right, so check out those 4 books. They're all in the show notes. You could see them there, and you can definitely grab a copy. Let's get into our second category, which is professional development. And these ones, what we were targeting this year is just free ones. Free things that could help you get some basic understanding of some EdTech tools that you maybe never tried before, or maybe you do use, but maybe you can learn something from. What I think we should do for this one is I'll read out 5. You could tell me which ones you already have and kind of point out anything that you want to point out with those. And I'll do the same thing, and then we'll get to our second 5. So we have links to all these EdTech tools where you can go and get a basic understanding of everything. So the first 5 happen to be some of my favorite ones on this list. Quizzes AI. Quizzes has taken big steps this year into AI, and I think they're doing an excellent job. But you could go over there. get certified there in their Quizzes AI. Now, each one of these tools might call it a different thing other than certification. Some call it Powered Up or Leveled Up or Academy or this or that, but I'm going to use certified as the unofficial term just so I'm not guessing on each one of these. Quizzes AI, check that one out. Magic School AI, Kahoot Certified, Canva Design School, which I don't know if you knew that they had, and Text Help Academy. Those are our first 5.
All right, so that's a strong list of 5. I'll say this, of the 5, there's only one that I have actually done so far, which is good for me, because now I've got some more stuff for my summer that I can check out. The one that I have is the Quizzes Game Changer certification. This is great for everybody who wants to get into the gamification world. We think Quizzes is probably the best one that is out there right now. Your other choices being things, of course, like Kahoot, Gimkit, and the like. And they're all excellent tools, but Quizzes has really embraced AI as like an integral part of what they're doing. And just from our time working with people at Quizzes, and, you know, shout out Kyle Nemus, who's over there now, and you've heard mentioned on our show a lot, but, you know, and using this as a tool in our own classrooms, it's just the best. It can do so many things. And if you do this Quizzes Game Changer and start to use Quizzes extensively, one of the benefits is they will open up features for you and your account that other people don't have. We found this out kind of the hard way in a presentation as we were planning on showing a group some of the stuff that you can do in Quizzes, and because it was my account we were using, I did not have access to features that we thought everybody had, which was not a huge deal in the moment. We just had to switch to someone else's account who was a game changer, and then those features were available. The point is, it's something you want to do, and Quizzes is something you should want to use. I don't have any of the others. However, Canva Design School obviously sounds like maybe my top one out of that list that I'm going to check out. Did not know that that existed, or at least if I did know, I had since forgotten. But that speaks to me. Of course, it looks like they go over some like graphic design essentials, and that is super cool. They actually have, if you check out the link in our show notes for this, these are just called Canva Design School courses. They have a ton of them. There's a lot of different things you can choose to learn about there. I'm just going to read some of them, like print advertising, Canva on your mobile, creating a logo. And guess what? These things could then also be incorporated in projects for your students who often are sort of left hanging for things like, okay, my teacher told me to design a logo that goes on my poster. How do I do that? And then you're left filling that gap. But Canva is doing a lot of this stuff for you, which is excellent. So that's the one I'm excited about, Canva Design School. And that would be our first 5. Excellent list, my friend.
Yeah, so out of these, I've done Quizzes AI, Magic School AI, and I've played around with the Canva Design School. All right, so Kahoot, I want to just kind of see what they have to offer. I know that they've made a lot of improvements, and I like to stay on top of these type of things, so I'll probably do that one. And I'm definitely going to check out Text Help Academy. The reason being is there's a lot of different tools over here that are kind of like aids for students, and it allows them to, I don't know, it helps them out in many different ways. These are accommodation tools. All right, they have Read and Write for Education. They have SnapRead, Equasio, RaiQ, I believe, is another one. These are all just coming off the top of my head. I know they have like several other ones. I think there's one called like Orbit Notes or something along those lines. But what I would like to do is get familiar with all of these just so I have a better understanding, because Text Help is pretty awesome. I always love their their products. I mean, Equasio is one of our all-time favorites.
Yeah, it's great. And some of those others you're looking for, I'm just on their website. I do not know these off the top of my head, but Fluency Tutor, UPAR, Claro Read, Orbit Note, which you mentioned.
Oh, I got, all right, good for me.
Very impressive. Co-writer. I mean, these are all excellent tools, and even if you don't know it, depending on the population you teach, there's likely a lot of students at your school who are using these things. You know, Read and Write for Education is the one I see more than anything else for students that need help processing the language that they are reading. And it would be cool to go through some of this coursework and learn about these tools. So that's a great one. How about I'll read the next 5 initially, and then you kick us off. Tell us what you got, what you don't got. The first one is called Updated Book Creator Certified Author Course. So Book Creator, making digital books, and they have an updated course to learn how to do that. Edpuzzle certifications. There's a bunch of different ones there. Edpuzzle, of course, an excellent tool. Same thing with our next, Screencastify University. All kinds of things to learn about there with Screencastify. Nearpod Certified Educator, and DFIT Certified Educator to round out our final 5 selections.
Yeah, so sadly, I have only done one of the 5 on this list. I've done the DFIT Certified Educator. A big fan of DFIT. I will always probably be a big fan of DFIT because they keep making awesome new updates and changes, and I really find that they listen to the people using their tool, and they're very responsive to the suggestions that you provide them. So if you have a suggestion for them, definitely go out and let them know about it. I think that's important. That's how we all keep moving in the right direction. I will tell you the first one out of all 10 of these that I will be going to check out is Edpuzzle. And the reason is our school buys a subscription for Edpuzzle. And other than the surface usage, I haven't done much with Edpuzzle. And unfortunately, it's just with the classes that I teach, it just didn't fit what I think my students could use at the time. But as I hear more and more about some of the new updates and features, I think it does support the population of the students that I teach better than what I initially thought. So I'm going to go check out Edpuzzle certifications. Book Creator is also one of these EdTech tools that I typically use for a project or two throughout the year, and I might check that one out as well. I'm a Screencast-O-Matic guy, so the Screencastify University, I don't know if I'll check that one out. That has nothing to do with them. It's just that I'm an OG. I'm proud of it. Screencast-O-Matic, which is ScreenPal now. I will stick with my ScreenPal just because I'm so fluent in it and I've used it for so many projects. I think the last time we looked, we were over 1,200 videos made on ScreenPal, so I think that's a pretty solid service. So I'm not going anywhere from that one.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I'm a ScreenPal fan as well, and I'm sticking with it. But Screencastify is excellent, so it's good to know they've got that university out there. I also have only done DFIT Certified Educator for myself, and I don't know, Nearpod, we don't have it at our school. We don't have the paid-for version, and with Quizzes, Quizzes has a thing called Quizzes Lessons that will get you close to what Nearpod can do. Not everything, of course. Nearpod fans, no offense, but certainly not everything, but it can get you close enough. And because Quizzes is what our school has for us to use the paid version of, that's what I'm more familiar with. So I don't think I need to repeat what you're saying because I agree with everything you said. I got to do more Edpuzzle. I do enough flipped classroom throughout the year that I do not use Edpuzzle for, and that's insane, right?
That is insane.
It's insane.
Like, I thought that would be like one of your heavy hitters.
I know. I never felt like I had the time investment to do it, like to move over all of the assessment questions from where they are now into Edpuzzle. But that's a lot easier because AI now, I believe that's incorporated in some of the Edpuzzle tools, and it will come up with those questions for me.
I'm just going to say this. Shame on you, Nick. I mean, shame on you. You make these beautiful videos. They're imperfect, but that's great because usually that's what the kids look for. That's what keeps them engaged is the fact that, Nick does 2 minutes of flawlessness and then he just flips out because he messes up and he leaves it in the videos. They think it's amazing. All right, I'm not sure if he cuts it out, but I've seen him flip out a time or two, and it makes me laugh, so it has to make them laugh. So let's get into our last category here, which are podcasts. We each chose at least one. I think I picked two, and I think you picked one for this one.
I just got one.
So you know what? I'll go first, and then you can go, and then I'll come back to my last one. And
Perfect.
I'm not going to go into too much detail with any of these, but I will tell you that I do have my updated podcast that I listen to and recommend, educational podcast list that I'm going to come out with. And basically what I do is I come up with like 5 to 10 new ones each year. That's innately what I get new. I'll give a shout out to Brian Carpenter and Fresh Air at 5 because oftentimes I hear or get introduced to these podcasts by him. And this first one is no exception. He was actually on it. And usually I catch something on Brian's social media to let me know that he's done another podcast. I really like the way that Brian tells stories and how every single podcast he's been on, I've learned something new about him through the podcast episode. So we have a lot of things in common. One of the things that hopefully one day Brian and I get to share is maybe like a little fishing trip or something like that. I might have to go up to his parts of Canada because it looks absolutely beautiful up there. But, I'm very excited to learn more about him and the podcast he recommends through his podcast. But the first one is called the Optimalist Podcast with Sarah Candela. Sarah Candela is the podcast host. She has guests on her podcast. I think she's connected with Swivel. We got one of those products, which is there's like an infrared lanyard on the speakers that the speaker wears, and it has a microphone to it. And as you walk around, the camera will follow that little tag and microphone that's around the person's neck. That's putting it very simply. But I think Sarah is with Swivel. I could be wrong. I apologize, Sarah, if I am. But I will tell you that she did have Brian Carpenter on an episode called Online Education and Building Tenacious Classrooms. She also throws out a blog that talks about some of the things that they talk about that you could go check out. I have this in the show notes. Really, it seems like each one of her episodes features somebody and features a craft or a piece of advice or a teaching strategy or methodology or pedagogy that, they believe in. And then they just dig a little deeper and get to talk about, basically what that person wants to showcase and share. And she does a really nice job showcasing awesome educators and, basically bringing these teaching strategies to life through a podcast. And I've learned a lot from this episode, and I've listened to a couple of the episodes since. It's definitely something that's in my podcast catcher that I do throw into my rotation. But definitely check out this episode. And the second segment is my favorite one, and I called this the pure gold of this episode, and it's called The Joy of Teaching and Witnessing Students' Growth. There's a lot to be said there, and there's a lot to unpack, so I don't want to give away the episode, but go check it out. Link is in the show notes.
Sounds like a great one. I haven't listened, but I'm going to start with the episode that you recommended with Brian, of course, to see what it's all about. For my pick for the summer, my only pick, and you got to stay with me here, everybody. Don't turn it off thinking that I've gone off the deep end when I tell you the name.
He has.
It's called Stuff They Don't Want You to Know, and it is a conspiracy theory podcast on its face until you listen to it and you find out that it is a podcast that talks about conspiracy theories. However, they actually call themselves conspiracy realists because the three guys who do this show, they unpack a conspiracy theory, but then in sort of wading through all of the data, and here's how it's going to tie into my idea and education in general. They wade through the data, they focus on the actual facts and separate them from things that are not facts, that are just conjecture and people talking without any factual basis. They almost always come to the conclusion that this conspiracy theory is just that. It's a theory that is likely not true, and hence the term conspiracy realists is what they actually refer to themselves as. I like this because in this digital age, of course, we see lots of people with really bad information, and the same is true for students. They often don't know how to tell good information from bad, and I think as teachers, we kind of need to address that, right? And
Fake news.
yeah, fake news. It's all. I mean, there's 1,000 things we could mention here. What a cool way to bring that into your classroom by sort of, I don't want to say tricking students, but catching their attention the same way that this podcast caught my attention, which is, hey, here's a conspiracy theory. Let's break it down, take a look at what we actually for real have evidence of. Let's look at what we don't have evidence of, and then come to our own conclusion about this thing. And just like with their episodes of this podcast, you almost always land on the fact that, well, we really don't have evidence for what this conspiracy theory is saying. And these, my friends, are just good life lessons. So I want to listen to as much of this as I can, and my eventual goal is to build this into a student project that features a conspiracy theory that the students would then sort of decode and break down and come to a conclusion on. The focus, of course, being critical thinking. So that's what I'm going with. It's called Stuff They Don't Want You to Know. And I can say that I have actually listened to several of these so far. It's a great show, very entertaining. And the three guys, I can't think of their names off the top of my head, but they're doing a great job. So check it out if that sounds interesting to you.
So you really, when you go into podcasts, you really don't stray away from your search. Because the two podcasts that I've ever heard you talk about that you really liked are stuff you should know,
Yep.
and stuff they don't want you to know.
This is all of these are part of the same universe. There was some original website that kind of spawned all of these, and it's like, I can't remember. It has something to do with like stuff to know, as you're saying. But yeah, all of these people in the podcasts that I mentioned are all part of this network of podcasts. And for some reason, it just speaks to me, and I always find ways to link it to teaching. So
you kind of sound like, if I had to guess right now, if I didn't know anything about you, you're the type of guy that eats the same thing for breakfast every morning. Is that true?
It's actually not. Well, is it true? Maybe it is true. I pretty much have two things: bagel and cream cheese, or just like a little thing of yogurt, like every day. Those are my go-tos.
All right. So there you have it.
All right, good guess.
Stuff you should know, and the stuff that I do know.
I'm more impressed you remembered my prior year's podcast selections. That's pretty good.
Well, I mean, you have a poster in your office.
That's true. Yeah.
See, I stop over into Nick's office every single day and say good morning.
Yep. What are we working on today?
And ask him what he needs done today.
Right.
Because he's the boss. All right. So let's get into my next one. And really, this one it says that it is a podcast for teachers. And it's not wrong. All right. This one is Tech Tools for Teachers podcast by Shana Martin. I agree with that title, but I'm also going to take it a step further and say it's also a Tech Tools podcast for parents.
Right.
All right. Everyone knows, or if you listen to us before, you know that I have 3 boys. Right now, they're 4, 6, and 8. However, by the time you listen to this, they will be 5, 6, and 9. Because I have 2 June birthdays, and this one's probably going to go out around the oldest one's birthday. But they all love science and curiosity and just being curious about different things, especially my oldest one. He loves studying weather and the galaxies and all that. And at the age of like 2 or 3, we bought him a weather station. All it did was a little sensor that told him the cloud cover, precipitation probability, and temperature. I mean,
cool.
It's like when I say precipitation probability, it's a percentage of the likelihood it's going to rain.
Sure.
All right. It's very simplistic. Okay. And he loved that stuff. And over the summer, I have Daddy Day School. All right. I believe that especially my 2 youngest, in order for them to stay in a rhythm with education and, keep their learning going, I need to sit them down for 15, 20 minutes and teach them about something every single day.
Right.
And then we gamify it. They get spins, which gives them points. All right. So if they earn 3 spins with the things that they did that day, they would go over to my computer. I have a little crane game that I put in points, and it picks up the points. And then next thing you know, they work together to get a whole bunch of points. And once they get like 1,000 points, we go for ice cream, or 2,000 points, we go for a movie, something like that.
Right.
This podcast I just came across, and I will be using a lot of these episodes to help me prepare for these little 20 to 25 minute learning events over the summer. All right. This one was called Fun Ways to Teach Kids About the Weather. And in this episode, Shauna, I apologize, but I'm going to go with Shauna, I think, on this one. Shauna introduces 2 websites, and they were called Weather Whiz Kids and snowcrystals.com. And basically, they gave me a whole bunch of resources that I needed, where I will use this summer with my sons to enrich some of the ideas that they find interesting, to further explore weather. And there's a whole bunch of different episodes on a whole bunch of different topics, but I'm going to be checking these out to see if I can get some ideas for my kids over the summer. I think teachers could use this for their young ones in class. And I also think that, parents can use it to, really expand the things that students are interested in. I'm not sure if any of my kids would sit down and listen to a podcast, because anytime I have a podcast on in the car, they want their music. But I think they would greatly benefit from the resources that this podcast shares.
So everybody, if you made it this far into our episode, you got a little parenting advice from Papa Guise over there. Not just EdTech advice, but regardless of what you got out of this, we just hope that there's even one of these resources that is going to bring you something to take a look at and change your teaching practice, hopefully for the positive, in the coming school year. So as always, thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening to the EdTech Throwdown. Do us a couple of favors. Subscribe to our podcast on any major podcast catcher such as Apple, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, and Stitcher. Go over to YouTube, search the EdTech Throwdown, subscribe to the channel. You can connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. The show's handle is EdTech Throwdown. You can connect with Guise at GuiseGotTech, Nick at NickGotTech. You can write us an Apple Podcast review. You could tell your friends about www.edtechthrowdown.com. And lastly, go over and check out our friends over at the Teach Better Podcast Network, a network that we are so proudly involved with. Until next time, remember, go try some EdTech, because we will do the research so you can teach your class.